about it there. The whole theme of the gospel in the reading today is about vineyards, of course. And because that's very, very common. At the time of Jesus, people knew what he was talking about. And we even have in our own country, we have the vineyards out in California right now that are burning up. In some of those Northern California, the vineyards have caught fire. And what a terrible thing it is. Imagine if your cornfields caught fire before you harvested. How fast that would go. Does the same with the vineyards. Except they can't just plant it. They can plant it next year, but they have great grapes for a while. Just want to keep them in our prayers. But obviously, Jesus used the vineyard as a symbol of something else. It had to do with the vineyard. The caretakers of the vineyard were the people of Israel. And then they rejected the prophets that he sent and ultimately rejected his son. And what had happened is Israel had changed over the years their practice of religion, especially with the religious leaders. And they developed so many laws that you almost had to be a full-time rabbi or a full-time Pharisee or Sadducee to fulfill that. If you're a regular Jew, it's almost impossible to live the law because there's so many of them. And so what happened then is that Israel itself was falling apart. It was as far as their walk with the Lord. And that's what Jesus was telling them. And they didn't even recognize the Messiah who had come into their midst. And the scriptures prophesied about it if they just looked at it. And so he says, and that's why the kingdom of God is being taken away from you and given to a people that will produce its fruit. Well, we can take that and put it into the current day for ourselves and our country. A long time ago, Mother Teresa said that when she works in India with the poor and the dying, they are poor and they are dying. But she said the U.S. has a much greater poverty, the death of the spirit. She said the spirit is dead in the United States. And it's true. Spirit, as far as the Holy Spirit, our country, the soul of America is dying quickly. Obviously, you see it on the news. It's been dying for a long, long time, but now it's so manifest that it seems imminent, which it doesn't have to be, but it is. America is dying. The stamp on a coin and the print on a bill that says, "In God we trust," that's all it is. A stamp and a piece of print. Because we certainly don't. I'm talking about the country as a whole. What happened? Well, lots of things happen. First of all, it begins in the human heart. What happened? Any war, for example, war begins in the human heart. And then it moves to family, then it moves to society, then it moves to a country, then it moves to other countries. You look at the wars over the time of history, how many of them, and a number of them, were started because one family got in a fight with the other one. Like some of them, they were cousins in Europe and cousins in England, and they got in a fight over things, and then they start a war. So that's how war goes. But we can repair it starting with the human heart, too. But we have to change the way we think. And this being Witness to Life Sunday, it does begin with human life. I don't think there's any medical science as far as research now that denies that human life begins at conception. They all say, yeah, that's a human being. It's not going to turn out to be a horse. I'll tell you that. It's not going to be a fish. It's going to be a human being. And it is a human being. You just study science and you study biology, and they all say now, yeah, it's a human being. So life does begin at conception. But we have this mentality in our country that's been so ingrained that we are in charge of life, and we decide when life begins and when life ends. You know, for example, there's basically 3 definitions of abortion. One is a medical definition, and then the the church has its definition, science does, along with the church. It begins at conception. And then there's the political definition. And that's anybody's guess what that's going to be. But that's what the laws come out of. So the politicians decide this is when life begins. Okay? So it's okay to destroy life before that. Yep. That's the moral thing. No, it's not. And each state is different. Look at a couple of states. The child can be aborted up to the point of giving birth. And some are pushing for, I think some have already accomplished it, that if the child was meant to be aborted and was born alive, you can let it die. But make sure you're nice about it. You know, good gosh, what have we come to? But what has happened is our mentality has been changed to that I am in control of life and death. And this really started in 1968. It didn't start then, but Pope Pius VI had gathered together a commission to study means of regulating birth. You know, nowadays we have natural family planning, Creighton method, there's a couple other methods, symptothermic, and all of them are 97.9% accurate. So there's no medical drug on the market that's any more accurate than them. And yet, but there's a big difference. One is, I'm just going according to my body. Just because I happen to know that at this point in time the odds of becoming conceiving are very low, if not impossible, doesn't mean I'm trying to be in charge of life or death. I just happen to know that. And so it's amoral in that sense. But where I take positive action to choose to allow life to conception to take place or not, then I'm getting into a moral issue of now I'm trying to be God. And so Pope Paul VI wrote Humanae Vitae on human life in 1968. He was roundly condemned by society, by many in the church, and everything. And you read that encyclical. In that encyclical, he said, no, we can't start thinking that way. We can't start, we don't want to start choosing how we're going to conceive or choosing this or that, because it's going to lead to all sorts of things, all sorts of genetic issues. And in fact, when he wrote that encyclical, he gave $1 million to a place in the U.S. to research even deeper how to naturally regulate birth, study the human body. But Pope Paul VI went on to say, if you choose this direction from the very beginnings of conception, it's going to lead to abortion on demand. And he said, then it will lead to euthanasia. And he said, what he was basing it on is the history of the world, different societies, what happened when they started going down this path, and it always leads to the destruction of that society. It goes extinct. Look at Rome. Look at what happened in Rome. They made the same decisions, and the Empire of Rome is gone. You know, Vatican City is there, but that's not an empire. Sorry, Pope. But so, what happens is, you say, well, how is that different from other things? When we choose to decide when life begins and when life ends on our own, like I say, we are becoming God. Just a couple months ago, I saw a thing on the news, this famous music person or actress or whatever, she was talking about she just got an abortion, and they said, she said, well, I felt like God. She said, well, she was right. She was playing God. The only problem is she's not. And we promote it, in this country, we promote abortion in a particular way as a government and as Planned Parenthood. 80% of abortion places are in poor neighborhoods, especially black neighborhoods. Talk about systemic racism. We're out to destroy a society of people, purposely. Look at the numbers where these places are located, where the poor are. It's the best way for a government to try and eliminate poverty, just kill them. Margaret Sanger, she started Planned Parenthood. Read what she writes. Main reason she started that. To cut down on the number of blacks in this country. That's why she started it. You see where all this stuff is coming out of evil intent. And and now today, you know, there's a move toward nationally signing a nationwide law that any child could be aborted up to the point it's coming out of the womb. And from there, of course, if it has to be born and die as well, okay, you meant for it to die, so it's okay. It's not murder. Do you see what it does to our minds? No life is sacred. And even the end of life, now you shouldn't say end of life, you look at some of these medical insurances provided by the government. There are certain things in there that when you reach a certain age, you might be very healthy and everything, but the medical need, whatever you need medically, is going to be denied because you're no longer productive for society. So the government is going to pay that bill. They're going to say, you want to do it, pay it yourself. You need a new hip, pay it yourself. You know? And it's happening, and euthanasia is happening right now. I experienced this with my own mother. She had a crushed vertebrae, and they had the surgery. They go in, it's like, they go in the back and they dump in cement or something. And you have to lie flat for 24 or 48 hours. And what happens is the person's older, I don't know, maybe it happens to the younger too, because of the type of surgery it is, they can't swallow when they first come out of the surgery. So they put a feeding tube into them to feed them so they stay alive until they begin to swallow again. Well, it was on a weekend, I remember, because it wasn't the regular doctor, the weekend doctor was there. My brother came to me and said, you got to talk to the doctor. I said, why? He wants to pull the feeding tube on Mom. I said, really? So I remember standing at the end of the bed talking to the doctor. I said, well, you want to pull? Yeah. I said, why? She's not able to swallow. He said, well, sometimes if you pull the feeding tube, the body reacts and it'll kickstart it to swallow. Oh, okay. I said, if it doesn't, well, then she dies. That's just how he said it. Then she dies. I said, keep the tube in. I mean, she lived like for 4 or more years after that just fine. But that was in her own state. And he wouldn't have had any criminal charges for doing it. Because she's at a certain age, no longer productive for society, fine. Pull the feeding tube, she dies, she dies. So it shows you how a pandemic, talk about a pandemic. We got a pandemic going on. And you could go on and on about this. And so we wonder why our children in some parts of the country, you know, some society, cultures, 80% of the families don't even have a father. A lot of them don't even know who the father is. You know, they know statistically that if the mother brings the kids to church when they get to be adults or older teenagers, about 4 or 5% will continue in their faith. If the father brings them to church, up to 60% or more will remain in their faith. So if there's no father, go figure. So you can't really point the finger at a certain age group that has no concept of life, because they've been taught that from birth. They can do whatever they want. You see these people with these riots and demonstrations, and one guy will go up to another guy and shoot him in the head because he's for one candidate, and the same happens the other way too. There's no value of life. Why? What? So? And you get in relationships. I happen to know of one relationship. I didn't have the wedding, so we're not even here. Way. The pastor told me he was visiting with the couple who were engaged to get married. And while they were in one session, they found out, the bride found out that the groom voted nationally for people she didn't want to vote for. She called off the wedding. So I said, thank God they found that out before they got married. So anyway, I'm going on in here. But the reality is, how do we change it now? America is dying. The soul of America is almost dead. And how do we change it? Well, we can vote. That's one thing. Sure, vote. And it changes in the human heart, just like war begins in the human heart. Where's my relationship with the person of Jesus? Do I surrender to the person of Jesus? Or do I say, no, Lord, I'll take care of today. You keep watch over me, but I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm in charge here. No, we're not. I don't know. We don't know the next minute. I don't know if I'm going to make it here to the altar before I could drop over and be gone. Just like that. So, we're in control of life? I don't think so. So what we do in the human heart, we keep surrendering to the person of Jesus. Allow him to work in our spirit. Allow him to make us a person of kindness, patience. Look it up in St. Paul. The reading is read at a lot of weddings. Love is patient. Love is kind. Doesn't get angry. Live it in our heart. And as we live it in our heart, it'll naturally flow out to others. If I'm impatient with other people, it's not because of something they're doing, really. I mean, you can get frustrated, but I'm not. If I'm really impatient type person with other people, it's because I'm so impatient with myself. That's where the problem is. If I have a hard time forgiving other people, it's because I refuse to forgive myself and allow forgiveness in my life. So it starts in the human heart. It starts with me. Then it moves to the family. My children, my spouse, my brothers and sisters. How do I treat them? How do I treat them? Because the way I treat them is in here. That's just how I treat myself too. Might not recognize it, but it is true. And then from there out into society, into work, into so on and so forth. That's how society changes. Now, are we going to be able to fix this one right now in the next year or two? I doubt it, unless a miracle happens. But it can start, and it begins in the home. And thank God we have a lot of families here with mothers and fathers and so on. It begins in the home. You can be this catalyst for the whole country. How we treat one another here. So when people come here, let's say to visit St. Philip's, they leave here feeling like, wow, I feel good. I feel like I met Jesus. That's what we want people to feel when they come here. So anyway, human life is sacred from the very beginning till its natural death. And that's it. There's one more thing. A couple months ago, the federal government signed into law. They reactivated the death penalty. They reactivated using the death penalty, federal. It's the same thing there. Why? Because it's a really bad person that did a really bad thing? Yeah, okay. You might want to kill them, but why are you killing them? Are they still, if they're in prison, are they still a threat to someone else? Are they still a threat to society? If not, why am I killing them? I'm starting to play God again. It doesn't matter. I mean, it could be horrendous, obviously, what they did. But why am I killing them? They're not a threat to society. I would say the death penalty would be very rare in the sense of where you could prove that this person going into prison, even in prison, will be a serious threat to society. Then you have an argument for death penalty. But other than that, we're just playing God again. Same as at the beginning. We're doing it at the end. Life is sacred in all its forms, all its disguises, from beginning to natural death.